Hey, you're live on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. And those who don't know, I'm Teddy. I'm the technical guy who's supposed to make the technical stuff work. And I think I'm doing it okay. I'm trying my best to do it right. So if you've never been on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy, you're going to have some fun because we bring special guests with lots of great conversations. Well, first, want to thank our sponsors, Blackwell Captive Solutions. They're all about healthcare and helping organizations manage one of their biggest spends. If you want more power and greater transparency with your health plan, then Blackwell Captive Solutions may be someone you should talk about, because they're all about helping you manage the cost on your self-insured business insurance for your employees. So reach out to Blackwell and help have a conversation with them about tracking every dollar you spend on your insurance. And to find better ways to manage your self-care and that cap on that cost. Hey, Randy, come here, buddy. There you are. How you doing?
Yeah. Hey, I'm good. I'm trying to find us on Facebook, but we seem to be anonymous at the moment.
I've got it. It says it's going live. So while you take a look at that real quick, I'll introduce myself to the audience. Okay. And then if it's not out there, I'll go fix it. So,
and we're good on Facebook. I saw it on Facebook or on LinkedIn. I think we're fine there, but I didn't see it on Facebook. So
okay, well, I'll take a look after I introduce myself. So hey, for anybody who's never met me, my name is Teddy. I'm a LinkedIn strategist. I run a business called Burriss Consulting with my business partner, girlfriend, wife. And we teach LinkedIn as a business tool. We also teach Google Workspace as business tools as well. I love doing that work. But while I go look at the technology, I'll let Randy stop and introduce himself, and I'll go find out what's going on LinkedIn.
And we're all set with both. So I think
I knew I could fix it, Randy.
The internet gods have smiled down upon us today, Burriss. So I appreciate that. Hey, Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, in gloomy, dank, and wet and cloudy Winston-Salem today. What happened to the sunshine, Teddy? Did not we put in a request for some nicer weather? But
well, I think I asked for I asked for a nicer weekend, and I think I had to pay for it today.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what you don't have to pay for, and that's our services. Goodwill Industries, we're free. I run our professional center, been doing it for a little over 10 years, and for probably 10 or 15 before that, had my own firm doing the same kind of work. So if you're in a job search, maybe that New Year resolution kind of thing, we're happy to help. I have clients all across the country, and so to include here in Winston as well. But yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn, get you on the calendar, and get you off to a new start in a new year. But first, let me introduce an old friend of mine. Went to college with Scott Sullivan.
Old?
When I say old, I mean old.
Oh.
We both had more hair back when we knew each other, but that was many moons ago. We're not going to tell stories or anything like that. But no. I've known Scott for going on a good number of years, and we'd kind of lost touch over time. And of course, I'd see him on LinkedIn, Facebook, that kind of thing. And we reached out to each other. And so I've been following some of the escapades over the years in the solar business with you, and ask if you'd like to join our show and really explain for our viewers what's real, what's the history behind solar power, how do we deal with batteries? The industry's evolved. So we're going to touch on a lot of that. If you happen to be in the audience and you want to ask questions of Scott, then put them in the chat area. Teddy, you'll keep an eye on that. We'll try to work. Yeah, Teddy?
I do have one initial question. When did solar energy get started? And I'm being facetious.
well,
look in the sky, right? But Scott, why don't you do a little bit better job than I did of introducing yourself, and then we'll dive into the conversation today.
I'm Scott Sullivan. I currently live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been in the energy business for almost 30 years now. In the actual renewable space, we call renewable is a little bit broader topic, but solar, wind, energy efficiency for the last 22 years. And I consider myself an expert. I get to travel around. I've been super, super blessed. I've traveled all over the world, helping companies and homeowners save money on their energy spend and take control of their energy spend by giving them options like solar and wind and energy efficiency and things like that. So I've been doing that for a very long time. I have a beautiful wife, Susan, who helps me in my business, and I've been living in Nashville for just the last 7 or 8 months, but I spent a couple of decades, over 2 decades in Northern California prior to that, and was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, though. And then you and I knew each other when we were both hanging out in the Buckeye State. So, so that's sort of my background, and I am here to, enlighten anybody that wants to know about solar. My wife just hates it when we go to a cocktail party because 20 years ago, nobody could spell solar. And now everybody wants to talk about it. So it's every time we go to a cocktail party, it's like, oh, look at Scott over there. He's got like 20 people around there asking questions about solar.
The sunshine guy. There you go. I hope, it's, again, you got to love it when it's sunny out, because I would think that helps drive the business. But I always ask the why question, Scott, of every guest we have. I mean, you're passionate about what you do. You've been in this biz for 30 plus years now. So was it a single instance? Was it a series of events? What's your why? And help us understand that.
Okay. So the why for me was really because we live in a world of monopolies, and now I know there are some exceptions to that, so I don't want to get too verbose around it. But what I'll tell you is, when you move into a house or an apartment or somewhere in a geographic area, you usually only have one choice. You have a water company, electric company, so deregulation is starting to change some of that, but most of us live in a monopolized world. So you have an electric company, and when you move into that house, that's your electric company. You don't have a lot of choice. And that freedom of having the ability to do something different. The utility, you're completely at their beck and call. If they say the price is going up, it goes up. If they say the power's out, it's out. I mean, there's really not a lot that you could do until recently. So now that technology has finally caught up. So my why was always to give that extra special amount of freedom and a little bit more of the control back in the homeowner and the business owner's life. And, there's a lot of things that really resonated with me, is, for instance, is the amount of energy density that goes into a product. So if you look at a car, it takes energy to assemble all the parts and pieces, but the actual cost of energy is not a big component of that. But if you take something like an insulation, the yellow or pink fiberglass that you put in the walls, that's nothing but sand and energy, because they melt the sand, they blow it through a compressor to make it into cotton candy. So like 95% of the cost of that product is energy. So if I can reduce the amount of energy it takes to make it, I can lower the price, or I can make more profit, so that kind of control is what got me into the why. And I've been chasing it ever since.
Hey, by the way, just out of curiosity, if you happen to be watching, we have 10,000 folks on the Zoom call, and who knows how many on live with LinkedIn and Facebook. But if you have solar power, or maybe you work at a company that uses solar, put it in the chat area. We'd like to hear from you, and try to work that in the conversation. So, all right. So let's kind of set the stage. First of all, I know you were joking, but nobody knew how to spell solar back in the day. And so now everybody is like, hey, man, what's it all about these days? So let's go back in time a little bit. Help us understand the history of solar power. When did it really get its foothold here in the States? Or maybe it began overseas. I don't know. Help us understand where this all came about.
Bell Laboratories, 1958. So Bell Laboratories, back when, Ma Bell, Bell Laboratories in 1958, they took a piece of silicon and they doped it. That's what it's called, doping it. They put a chemical on it, and without any moving parts, they turned a photon into an electron. Now, it was a very, very, very small and very expensive project that they worked on. But the reason for it was, I think most of us are on this call are old enough to remember when JFK said, we will put a man on the moon by 1969. We had to reinvent everything. How do you power a satellite? So when they put Sputnik into the orbit, it would only last as long as the battery. And then when the battery ran out, it literally stopped transmitting. So they had to figure out a way is, how can we continue to power things when there's not a cord connected, right? So wireless technology, all of the wireless drills and everything else that came out of it. That's why solar and batteries are so married. We're part of the same DNA, because what happened is, now we put satellites into orbit, and you have these big wings that come out. Those wings are actually solar panels. that are as thin as a piece of aluminum foil, but they're producing electricity and they're keeping the batteries on the satellite charged. So we have terrestrial solar and we have extraterrestrial solar, but that's where it started in 1958. And then through the space program, we had to figure out how are we going to power all these things. So that's when the development started. Now, we'll tell you is to kind of put it into perspective, back then, it was thousands and tens of thousands of dollars per watt to manufacture. And it would never make sense, you know, here on Earth to do that, right? But we had to have it. So as it evolved, the real change came in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the federal government started subsidizing it, and they would give a rebate. And when they gave a rebate, then you started seeing manufacturers get in and you saw the price plummet. So I'll put it into perspective for you. When I joined the solar industry, a watt of solar, now and I'll explain that to you in a minute, but a watt of solar was $11.50 per watt installed. And today, to kind of put it into perspective, it's usually around $2. So we've seen a drastic pricing decrease and increase in technology. So let me give you a real quick energy lesson. So if I held up a light bulb and I said, draw a light bulb, everybody would draw a round globe of glass with a little filament in it, if you're our age anyway, and that's an incandescent bulb. There you go. And if you look on the top, it probably says 100 watts.
Something like that.
Yeah. So the top of it will say it's 100 watts. If you took 10 porcelain little light fixtures and you put 10 100-watt light bulbs on that board and you turned them all on, that's 1 kilowatt. That's 1 kilowatt of energy. That's an amount of energy. And if you flip the switch and you leave it on for an hour, that's 1 kilowatt hour of energy. Now, to put that into perspective, a hair dryer is usually 1,000 watts or more. So that same energy to run those 10 light bulbs is what it takes to turn on that hair dryer and run it for just a minute.
I wouldn't know it. You're talking a language I don't.
Yeah, but you know,
you're talking hair dryers.
This is
you had me up till then.
I always wonder when I walk around my house, as I have some guests that are staying in my house, and they understand on, but they don't understand off.
Right.
And so I want to figure out how can I express to them the power of off. And so understanding kilowatt and how much kilowatt per hour costs, and I can go say, look, every time you leave that light bulb on, it's costing me an arm and a leg.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. And depending on what state you're in and how you produce your electricity, the utility regulates that price and mandates how much you're paying. So in California, that would be 36 to 38 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you left those lights on for an hour, it costs you 38 cents. If you do it in North Carolina, it's about 14 or 15 cents. You do it in Tennessee, it's 11.5 cents. So it does vary across the United States. And there's multiple reasons why for that. Depends on if your mix is nuclear, coal, or fossil fuel, natural gas. Depends on how the utility is generating that. So what I do is everybody here, no matter who's listening right now, you have an electric bill. If you own your own home and you get an electric bill, I'm going to take that bill and I'm going to repurpose it. So if I could produce the same amount of energy for the same amount of money on your roof with solar, and you never had to pay the utility any more money, all you would be doing then is you would be saying is, I'm now taking control of the energy that I use, and you're no longer exposed to price increases. So here's my analogy. 1971, Randy, you and I meet and I give you a magic gas card. And that magic gas card says, from now on, anytime you use this gas card for the rest of your life, your gas is always going to be 50 cents a gallon. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm only paying 40 cents now. Why would I pay you 10 cents more for a magic gas card? Because in 2021 or 2020, that was $6 a gallon. So you actually, the delta under the curve becomes your savings, right? So that's what you're doing with solar. You could put solar on your roof and actually match dollar for dollar. If you have a $200 electric bill and you put solar on your roof and you have a $200 loan payment because you're borrowing money to put the solar on your roof, then your electric bill for essence becomes $200 a month until your loan's paid off.
Yeah. So it's kind of, you look at it as an investment in your home, just like you would
Exactly.
with new windows that are better insulated and just a number of things that ultimately bring the price down. All right. So it started in 1958.
Right.
And it sounds like the space program, that makes sense because I could just imagine that's a heck of a long extension cord.
Yeah.
It'll
Run
have
up to-
knots in it too.
I mean, it's an extension cord beyond all wild dreams. So I get it there. And so then eventually then it started to get into what commercial use, because no individual could afford that at first.
So,
Yeah. How did it kind of drift and get into a price point that more people could take advantage of?
Well, the federal government started to created a rebate program, and when they created the rebate,
that's really what it was,
and it really did make it more affordable. But now you're still at the very high end of the, you know, the 1% of the 1%. You're at the high end of the spectrum. But the more manufacturing that came in, and the more the demand was, the lower the cost. So once the cost got down to around $3, then every homeowner could afford that. So what ends up happening is, if I had 200, and where it really took off was in the mid 2000s, like 2015, you know, 2010 to 2015.
Okay.
Once you had an industry that was so well established that financial vehicles were applied to it. Before you had to pay cash. Now we have 100 companies out there that will finance it. So it would be like in the old days when you bought a car, you had to write a check for it. Then they came out and said, okay, well, I'll finance the car for you for 60 months. The same thing, once the industry got big enough and the financial industries or the financial institutions got involved, that changed the entire game, because now I could replace that $200 electric bill with a $185 loan payment, and I could give you immediate savings. Plus, in 10 years or 15 years, the price drops to zero because you paid off the loan. And now it's still producing the same amount of power. And the other misnomer that people, there's no moving parts on solar. And the other misnomer is people used to talk about how, well, it's not going to last very long, whatever. The products today have a 25-year warranty, and they will produce power for up to 50 years. So the federal government's getting long-term, and you guys driving around, you know this, you go to a shopping center, and now there's a parking structure, a shaded parking structure, and that's all solar. The EV industry needs places to charge EVs. So we're building these shaded parking lots, and that's solar on the roof. And when you're not charging your car, it's powering the building. Yeah.
What about, and by the way, if you have questions for Scott or comments, we've got a couple. I don't know if you want to work those in, Teddy, or
In a bit.
What about legislative? I mean, let's face it, the power companies, I'm sure they have their folks that lobby, for their purpose. I'm being gentle here.
Want to sell oil, want to sell coal.
Yeah. And so what are some of the legislative hurdles that you've had to deal with? And I mean, I imagine you got all kinds of stories, but just give us a little glimpse in some of the infighting that had to go on to get this thing off the ground.
Well, you can imagine we're not the utilities' favorite people, because we're, you no longer have to rely on their pipes and wires, right? And when that happens, they legislate against us as hard as they can. And then they pass laws, like, for instance, California passed a law where I couldn't generate power and sell it to you, my next door neighbor. So it's against the law to do that. And then we're breaking some of those laws down, and now we're building community solar where, an HOA can build a solar array in the back of the subdivision and power all the houses. But before, you weren't able to do that. And I think it's kind of come to the pitchforks and torches, storming the castle, because Americans are pretty independent people, and we want to be in control of our own destiny, and I think that's the way we're driving. Now, there are utilities throughout the United States that are far more progressive than others. What will eventually happen, I think, that we call this distributed generation when we put solar on roofs. And eventually, I think when you move into a house at some point, unless the utility is just going to become, non-existent, then I think someday the utility will say, hey, you're moving into a new house. Would you like us to put solar on that for you? And then we'll run the power through our meter, and we'll just lower the price. And, we'll still be involved in the the revenue stream. I think those progressive utilities will probably be the ones that succeed and the ones that dig their heels in, because eventually we're right at the cusp right now of having the technology to never have to be connected to the grid ever again. Solar and a few batteries, and guess what? I can cut that wire and I'll never have to worry about it ever again.
Yeah, pretty cool. And I think I cut the cord on my cable company, and that's, again, you go back in the day, you had the cable company and you didn't have a whole lot of choice. And, you know, of the 300 channels or 500 channels, there might be 5 or 6 that you watch, but you had to pay for all of it.
Yeah.
And now hipsters like Teddy and me, you know, we've cut the cord. So we're on the leading edge of technology. You are, aren't you, Teddy?
Yeah, well, when I want to watch my over-the-air antenna TV, my wife has to pedal the bike that makes the electricity.
Like the Flintstones.
Energy efficiency, man. That's energy efficiency. Plus, think of all the health benefits you get from that.
She does. I don't do it. She does.
You know, he watches. He's faster. That's all. He just is faster. So I love the idea of this whole thing with the efficiency.
And which, by the way, Todd brought up, talk about the efficiency of solar.
Okay. Yeah. So there's two. When we talk efficiency, we have to talk about two different things, right? Because efficiency is what is the efficiency of the sun hitting the panel that gets converted to electrons? Yeah. And that's a little bit of a rabbit trail. So I want to make sure that everybody understands. Efficiency only matters when you have limited geography, and then it's actually called energy density. It's not called energy efficiency. The efficiency of the panel is if I get 1,000 watts per meter squared of sun that hits a panel, how much of that gets converted to electricity? Now, right now we're in the high end, we're in the 20s, 23, 24% efficient. And in the low end, depending on the technology, we're in the 12 to 16% efficient. Now, that doesn't sound like it's very efficient at all, but the reason is it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how efficient they are. The only time the efficiency matters is when you have limited geography. So here's the counterintuitive thought of that. Remember, we talked about shaded parking. If I am getting paid or getting value for shade. So for instance, if you're in Tempe, Arizona, and it's 115 degrees and you touch your steering wheel and it burns your hands, you're looking for a shaded parking spot. So if I'm getting value for the shade, I actually get paid by using a lower efficient panel because there's more of them to make power. So the more of them I have, then I'm getting paid for the shade. It makes sense. Lower efficiency means I need more geography to get to a certain amount of power. I do that, I get a lot more shade, and I don't have to buy the more efficient panels at a higher price. I can buy a lower price, spread it out, get lots more shaded parking, and everybody's happy at the mall because I get to park under a shaded parking lot. If you have a high efficiency panel that is more expensive, for instance, you have a high-rise building, 20 stories tall, you get to the roof and it's covered with package units for HVAC and all that. There's nowhere to put solar anyway. So no amount of density is going to matter. You're not going to be able to put enough solar on top of that roof to cover the whole building. So when you run out of real estate is when you want more efficient, the higher efficiency panels. Does that make sense? Because is the range of price between these panels that significant? Yeah, sure. So high end, you're at $1 a watt, and low end, you're at 25 to 30 cents a watt. So it's a 60-70% range.
Does it make any difference the intensity of the sun? Summertime, the sun is closer. It seems like it's a heck of a lot hotter than sunshine in the middle of winter. Yes. Help me understand the intensity coming from the sun.
So that is so two things. First of all, the solar panel likes the sun rays, the light waves, to be at perpendicular. So when you see solar panels and they're at a tilt, everybody goes, why are they tilted? Well, that's because whatever latitude on the earth you are. So if you were at the equator, they would be flat. We would put them flat because the sun is directly above overhead all year round. So they would be at zero. They would lay there. But in North Carolina, they're at 14 or 15 degrees. So coincidentally, your roof on your house is probably very close to that, 14 to 17 degrees. And that just works well because it's as close as to perpendicular as possible. And you also want a south facing panel, if at all possible, because as the curvature of the earth moves, you get exposed to more sun, right? And then as the earth tilts in the summer or the winter. So it depends on how you want to, is your biggest bill, I'm guessing, being in the business for a long time, I would guess your biggest bills are June, July, and August because of your air conditioning load.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we size the system to offset 100% of that load. And then as the earth tilts in the winter and that 17 degrees turns into more 23, your panels actually put out less power because two things. One, the earth is further from the sun, so we're getting less radiation, solar irradiation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then secondly is because the angle's a little bit more of an attack, you're getting a glancing. There's two things we talk about solar panels. It's emissivity, how much that it absorbs.
Wait a minute. What is that? What is that again?
Just go with absorb, Randy. Just
it
go with
absorbs.
absorb.
Yeah, how much
Okay.
light will it absorb? And that's called emissivity. How much does it absorb? And then reflectivity, which is like a mirror, how much of it bounces off, right? So so that's why if you actually looked at the glass on a solar panel on a microscope, it would look like a golf ball. It would it would be dimpled and roughed up because they're trying to trap the light waves inside because it has to pass through the glass to get to the cell. The glass is there to protect the solar cell.
Gotcha.
Way too technical. I didn't want to get into that detail, but that's why we size the system for the heaviest load. And that's why in the winter I have a negative $34 bill, and in the summer I still have a $50 bill because I sized it to cover my air conditioning load. And then the other thing is everybody says, oh, I have solar, energy's free. And they turn on the air conditioning, they turn it down to 60 degrees and they live in an ice box.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have to live within the means of your own generation too, right? Now, I don't mean generation your age. I mean generation of the amount of power you make.
Now, can the panels, you said there's no moving parts, but now my fertile mind is thinking here, wait a minute. If the change of seasons happen, can we make the panels pivot ever so slightly so they're still getting the optimal, what do you call that?
Absorption.
Absorption. Can they move? Can they be moved?
So we call that tracking, and there are two trackers. There's a single axis tracker, which is just what you say, but not on a residential because it's just too cost prohibitive. But on solar arrays out in the field, they have a single axis tracker, which means they tilt to match the sun during the course of the seasons. And then we have a dual axis tracker, and a dual axis tracker looks like a sunflower. It starts on the west, looking right at the sun. It starts on the east as the sun breaks the horizon, is looking right at the sun. And then as the sun travels across the horizon, it actually tracks. So it keeps the face of the solar panels right at the sun from the very early morning to the very early evening. And then when the sun goes down, it actually comes back and waits for the sun to come up the next morning. That's a dual axis tracker. Lot more complexity, a lot more expensive, but it'll increase your power output by a significant amount. So a lot of the times when you're driving down the field and you look over there and you see these things that look like giant sunflowers, those are dual axis trackers that are selling that power back to somebody, again, an energy density, making more power because they have less footprint. So we're just going to put in a little bit of glass because we want to make as much power as we possibly can. But you are so smart, Randy. You're right on it. Dual axis and single axis tracker on your house, though, we call that a fixed tilt.
Fixed tilt. I've been called worse, but that's good. No, really, this is cool, man, because you hear about solar power and all kinds of rumors, this and that, and I've never looked into it as a homeowner, so I don't know the detail. But it's really interesting. Ted, do you want to do the halfway break now, or you want to hold off on that?
Let's do the halfway break, and then I'll bring Don's question. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Randy, I've been experimenting with solar power for years, with ants and magnifying glasses. Hey, you're on lunch conversation
afraid of
with
that.
Randy and Teddy. I'm Teddy. My guest, my co-host here is Randy Wood, and our special guest is Scott Sullivan. Our sponsor is Blackwell Captive Solutions. We've known these folks for a long time. They have about more than 25 years experience in the health insurance business, and they have a medical stop called a loss captive program that can be easily implemented and works like a shock absorber for those high dollar clients that have or high dollar claims of medical claims, especially if you are self-insured. If you need help, you want questions or ideas about loss captive and health insurance for your company, reach out to blackwellcaptive.com, blackwellcaptive.com today, and let them know that Teddy sent you. Hey, let's let me get past my stupid joke about magnifying glasses and ants and talk about Don's question. Don says, are the ads that promise to have solar generate your power and sell it back to the power companies, are they a scam?
Absolutely not. That is true. It's called NEM, N-E-M, and it stands for net energy metering. And many utilities, now this is not across the board, but many utilities in the United States have a NEM, a net energy metering. And what that means is I size the array so that I'm turning the meter backwards during the day. Because remember, solar, I get this question all the time. Well, how much power does your solar array put out at night? None. There's no sun. But so if you're getting 4 or 5 or 6 hours of sun a day, especially in the summer, then what do you do about all the off hours? You know, Scott, what happens when I run my dishwasher at 10 o'clock at night? Well, you're still buying the power from the grid unless you have batteries, and then you're using your grid storage battery. But if you're not, you're using the grid, the connection that you have to the utility. So with a NEM, what that means is I turn the meter backwards. So if I put the array on your roof, Randy, just follow me here. If I put the array on your roof that is twice the power you need to run your house, and during the middle of the day, even though you've got your air conditioning on, we're still turning the meter backwards because I sized the array to twice the amount you need, then I'm using that grid and the net energy metering contract that I have with the utility. I am selling that power back to the grid. Now, here's the catch. Most of the utilities will buy it from you at wholesale price, and then they'll sell it to their neighbor at retail price. So your next door neighbor who doesn't have solar, they may be buying your power and literally delivering it to your next door neighbor and making 40 or 50% on that power that they're buying from you. So then what happens is you're turning that meter backwards for a credit, and then you're using up those credits at night. Because then when you come home from work at 6 o'clock and you turn on the TV and you do the dishes and you do the laundry and everything else, that meter's still turning and you're buying power back, but you've been banking credits all day during the day.
Wait,
right?
Scott, let me ask this question. I've been banking credits at wholesale price, but I'm buying it back at retail now.
But power at night is cheaper than power during the day.
Gotcha. Okay, I got you.
So
I dropped it in chat. Duke Energy, who covers lots of North Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, et cetera, has NEM agreements in all their territories.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Duke is a very progressive. Duke, Florida Power and Light, SCANA, which used to be around the
South Carolina.
Yeah. So there's a lot of them that are very progressive. One's in Georgia right now. I'm going to tell you, I'm not picking on AEP, American Electric Power, which is Georgia Power, Ohio Power, Western Kentucky Electric, those kind of guys. They're all part of the American Electric Power grid. They're not as progressive, shall I say. They do have agreements, but they're slanted very heavily towards the utility. Yeah. You can still make solar work. Solar works everywhere. You just have to have a what was that word you started with? Oh yeah, expectations.
Expectation. So solar has been around for a long time, and you've come a long way. Prices dropped a good bit. The government helped, I think, with incentives to allow for people to be able to afford it. And also, it sounds like also companies from out the lending institutions got on board with this and said, hey, just like you can finance a house, or a car, we can help you finance the solar. So I'm always curious too about, like Teddy gets mad at me and he comes to my house and he throws rocks at it and he'll break my panels.
I apologize to you already, dude.
So, or tree, obviously tree falls, that's one thing, but, vandalism or storms, cracks in the panels, is that a concern typically or am I just kind of wondering, because I think glass breaks.
It does, but it's a very, very specific glass.
Okay.
So generally speaking, again, I want to, and these are broad strokes.
Mhm.
If the hail that falls on your house is big enough, heavy enough, and powerful enough to break your solar panels, it's already destroyed your roof, right? So will it break? Yes, it will. The worst thing that we have is what you just mentioned is vandalism. Solar on schools, kid throws a beer bottle up and it falls, and yes, it can break a panel. Sometimes on golf courses, there'll be a golf ball that'll hit it hard enough to break it from occasion. It does happen. It's not as often as you would think, because it's not like a window. I mean, this is first of all, it's glass that's sandwiched in between. I mean, it's glass is a whole lot stronger when you layer it, right? So it's layered against solar cells and it's laminated to a back sheet. So there's not a lot of flex because it's got so many layers. So it doesn't break as often as you would think. But when it does, we can replace them without a problem. And or if that panel stops working, it doesn't bring down the entire array. It's just the power that's produced by that panel. But it does happen.
So question, could my homeowner's insurance help me deal with that?
Of course. And there's a company called Solar Insure, which you can actually pay a small premium, and they will actually insure your array as a separate rider on your homeowner's insurance and get it fixed. Well, what I'll tell you is, and this is free advice, I'm just giving you this, or free comment. What happens far more often than a glass breaking is a squirrel or a pigeon or something else gets underneath the array and chews on a wire. So we have probably 25 or 30% more calls to fix solar is because a squirrel got underneath the array and chewed through a wire and ended up, because the tree overhangs next to the roof and the squirrel gets on the roof and he makes a nest underneath there. And next thing you know, he chews the insulation off the wire. That happens far more often than a glass breakage. I've been doing this for 20 some years and actually in carrying panels up on the roof and installing them when I started my career. And I have probably seen less than 25 or 30 broken panels in my entire career. So it's not very often, but I see 10 or 15 squirrels every year that have chewed through a wire.
Or the same squirrel that's running around all these communities.
I think so. And if I catch it, man,
he's in trouble. Hey, we're talking with Scott Sullivan. Scott, what's your organization, your company? We want to make sure Teddy puts that in the chat. And also, if people want to reach out to you after the show with maybe more questions or maybe want to explore what those options might look like, how can they reach out to you? Well,
it's on Facebook. I'm Solar with Sully. So it's real easy to find. But my website is actually scottsullivan.biz, B-I-Z. So it's Scott Sullivan, B-I-Z, Boy India Zebra is my website you can go to. I am an independent a solar contractor and an independent solar salesperson. I'm an expert in sales and marketing, but I've been doing this for a long, long time. I sit on your side of the table as the homeowner. So if you have 3 or 4 quotes you'd like them to be reviewed, or if you would like to find the best way, I'm not talking bad about my industry, but it's just because it's so young and there's so many people out there. There's a lot of things that people will say to sit at your kitchen table to get you to close tonight. They will say almost anything to get you to sign that contract. And then because the industry is so young and it's very, very limited regulation, it's a little bit of the wild, wild west out there. So you need an expert to sit on your side of the table. It's like, my dad used to always say, 2 people work on a watchmaker and a fool, right? So don't get stuck getting into, these are 25-year commitments, right? You're 25 years, you're going to commit to a loan payment or a lease payment or a PPA. And those are all different vehicles that bring you solar. have an expert. Make sure that the person you know is sitting on your side of the table, that you trust. You know them, you like them, and you trust them. And if you want to do that, jump on a call with me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I wonder too, okay, so let's say I'm thinking about moving in a few years. This is maybe a starter house for me, or, I'm not going to be here for the 25 years, much like with home improvements. And are you able to typically recoup that in the selling price? How does that tend to work for you?
You can, but if you're going to move in the next 5 years, I would not buy solar. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of qualifications, and we haven't talked on those. But if you're going to be moving and you're going to move in the next 5 years, I wouldn't take on that extra debt to put onto the house, because then you have to transfer that over to the next owner in the form of, you got to write it off, pay it off, and then hand it to them for free, or you got to get them to assume your loan payment, which is just complicated. It's not necessary. And because it's probably got a 5 to 7 year payback on that. Remember that cost we were talking about putting it on. If it's got a 5 to 7 year payback and you move in 5, all you did is just took your electric bill and transferred it to a loan payment. That's all you did. And then you've got the complication of unwinding it when you move. So if it's not, if you're going to move that fast, there are other options that you can do. So for instance, and if you're a renter right now, they say, well, if you don't own your home, how do you put solar on there? Well, we have lots and lots and lots of options now. We have things that you can actually plug into a 110 outlet. I can't get in all the details here because it's so crazy, but if you have those, if you're necessary, you want to do that, then call me, send me an email. I'll gladly give you multiple companies that you can deal with. One's called Craftstrom. They make a battery and solar panels that are for every renter, even in an apartment. You just suction couple them up to the window, plug them in to a 110 outlet, and guess what? You've got solar, and when you leave, you take it with you.
That's something that I think Lisa had asked. If you move, are you able to take the panels with you?
Not if you mount them permanently on your roof. It's not cost effective. You can, you literally can take them, but it doesn't. It's like, why would you do that when you get there, you can just put it on your new house. You can put it again. It's not cost effective.
Yeah,
I'm with you. Hey, here's something.
New panels that are more efficient than the ones you put on your house 10 years ago.
Yeah, maybe, but it's just it's a simple fact. It's the labor is what kills you. It's the labor. It's like, why would you take your shingles off your roof and then go take them and put them on a new roof?
Teddy might, but he's.
But I have people that do it for me, Randy.
He's got people. Hey, I got to ask you about this off grid and grid connected.
Yeah.
So this whole, what is that called? The NEM. What if I say, I want to keep all of my power? I don't want to sell it back to those clowns. I want to keep it. So does that mean then I would need to purchase a battery?
Yes, you would be off grid. And off grid is you have some other form of energy production. Now, I personally, if I lived in North Carolina and I had a big acreage and I didn't, let's say I bought a plot of land and the utility says it's going to cost you $40,000 to run a wire out there because that's what they're going to charge you, I would just go off grid. And then what that means is I would buy solar and or wind, because it's also renewable. I put solar and or wind or both, because wind works at night, remember, because of the wind still blowing. I'd put in battery storage and I would put in a offsite generator. So you had everything. So you could live your life as if you were connected to the grid and you would never know the difference, which means I have full air conditioning, I have my well pump, so I'm living my life with all the conveniences of modern times today, and I don't have a utility bill because all of that equipment that I have that I bought is keeping me up and running, right? So you can also be a hybrid system where you could have a battery and or a generator. And then when the power goes down and the grid goes off, you could still watch the Super Bowl because your TV is working and your neighbor's not.
Aha. Yeah. That's pretty smart.
So, Don dropped in chat that when he first moved to North Carolina, his electric bill was $400 per month in the winter. Got as high as $600. He installed a solar assisted, he said water stove. I'm wondering if it's water heater or not.
Yeah, water heater.
His bill dropped to $125, and Duke Energy cut him off because they thought he was cheating. Yeah. Does that happen?
It does. It's called an SAHP, solar assisted hot water. So there's a couple of companies that make those. And it's actually a reverse. I don't want to get into the technology, but you put a solar panel outside. and it heats your water. You don't need gas. You don't need electricity. The sun will heat the water for you. It's not solar thermal. Solar thermal is when you pass the water through a panel and the sun heats the water.
Yeah.
That's a different system. Solar assisted heat pump or solar assisted hot water is where you actually generate electricity. And then, those in an electric hot water heater, there's elements that go in that heat the water. One of those becomes DC and one of them becomes AC. And then the DC goes from the solar panel straight to the element and it heats the water. And then the other one is AC as a backup. So yes, they're fantastic. And those are we're now calling those water batteries, because if you make that extra power, remember, Randy, we're talking about turning the meter backwards.
Yeah.
So instead of selling it at wholesale to the utility, I'm just heating my water with it.
Wow.
But there's so much more we could talk about. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for having me. Solar is here to stay, but it's in combination. Let's look at it as a holistic approach. Solar is just one piece of it. You can also look at wind in a variety of different ways. You can look at energy efficiency, because how we use our electricity is so much better. So remember that Energy Star and the miles per gallon on a car and all that. So how you use your energy is really important, and how well insulated your home is and your windows and all that. So first of all, how much does it cost to generate it? How do you use it? But it's also part of the bigger ecosystem now, with electric vehicles, with batteries, with the cost of storage coming down. You can now take control of your entire energy portfolio, and you can live a very, very comfortable life. This isn't living in a cabin in the woods where you have to heat, with a candle and heat with a fireplace. The technology we have today is, I could be off grid right now and you'd have no idea. You would have no idea. My house runs exactly the same as everybody else's, and I have air conditioning and giant screen TVs and everything else. And I'll give you a perfect example. If you've ever been on one of those big expensive RVs, that's running off of batteries 100%, and they've got giant screen TVs and hot tubs and everything else. The technology is here today. You can go off grid if you want. There's not a lot of lifestyle change, but it is more expensive. So what you're doing is you're taking your electric bill that you would normally pay to the utility, and you're just taking 5 or 6 years of that, and you're dumping it into technology.
Randy has not been invited to my RV yet, Scott, so don't bring that up yet.
Well, it is awful nice. Thanks for having me over last night too, Teddy. I appreciate it. I really appreciated your RV, and I was really, thank you also for dinner. That was really nice. Sorry, I didn't know Randy wasn't invited.
Yeah.
The things you learn, I'm telling you.
So
There's a lot. Yeah,
you want to talk about the solar and cars? I mean, in one of those manufacturers, don't they have solar panels all over the top of their car?
They sure do. But that's, again, that just is a assisted. It just it'll have to sit out in the sun for a long time to keep the car charged. But it does add it makes the battery last longer. But here's what I would do, guys. If you want to drive an EV, an electric vehicle, a fully electric vehicle, do not connect it to the grid. Go buy a solar carport that you park your car under, and it's got batteries on the side. Batteries are DC. So I'm taking my solar panels and I'm charging my batteries during the day. You get home from work, you pull your car into your solar carport, you plug it in, and you take the batteries that are full from the sun that day, and you transfer that power into your car, DC to DC. It's super energy efficient. It's not connected to the grid. The utility doesn't know you have it. And when you move, you take it with you. And your car's 100% charged all the time, right from the sun.
Yeah.
So batteries, we talked this last week with the EV fellow, Bill, and batteries, you have to mine stuff in the ground, and there's a whole environmental. So help us understand, how solar. It sounds like solar doesn't necessarily have to have batteries, or are there different types of batteries that aren't as maybe environmentally hazardous?
No, the batteries are the same. It's lithium ion and lithium ion phosphate and lithium cobalt and all the other same battery technologies, the same thing we use. We just generate electricity that we put in the battery. The batteries are still the same, but the actual footprint, the amount of material that's needed for a solar cell versus a battery is 1/1000th of 1%. I mean, it's a very, very, very thin coating. So our core our core component or mineral would be silicon, whereas theirs is cobalt and or lithium and or there's a whole bunch of different nickel metal hydrides and all the other stuff. So their mining to do what they need to do is extremely more intense than ours. So we take silicon and we put a chemical coating on it called doping. We put a chemical coating on it to make it a chemical reaction to take photons to electrons. Their chemical reaction is also comes from minerals, but it takes a whole lot more of them. And they need things like lead and acids and lithium and cobalt and all the other stuff they need. So there's a heavy duty mining piece to the batteries.
The good thing is that there's a whole nother technology that's being developed around batteries that we've got to hope that's going to work. And if
fusion.
we were in
cold fusion, come on.
I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you, this whole
business.
fusion thing is going to happen, and we're all going to be walking around carrying this little teeny thing in our pocket that powers everything and doesn't kill us.
And the solar industry will be dead because everybody will have a cold fusion. You pour a glass of water in every morning and you have power for the whole day.
Yeah.
That's wild. You think back years and years ago and how technology has changed and how everything from cable TV to how we heat our homes to how we drive our cars and just
these things, this all came about because of battery. You couldn't do this without a battery.
No,
so that's it.
No, very cool. Lots of good stuff.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me today. I'm so appreciative of you, and thanks for getting the word out. Thanks for what you do every day. And Randy, I hope you and Teddy get along better.
We're working on it.
Randy, anything else? What else you got queued up?
Well, I had jotted down a couple things, but really just take the crystal ball out for a minute here, and or you can use my head. So the crystal ball. Where's the future of this industry headed, and what are the big challenges coming up that you got to knock down?
Well, I think the way we win is California passed a law last year where they say that every new house constructed needs to have there's a formula. So per square footage, every home that's built has to have this amount of solar on it based on this formula. I think that's where we go. I think that as we move forward, the reduction of internal combustion engines, the integration of solar into our new building constructions, the utilities kind of get out of the way because the legislation will come and pass. And once the legislation passes, then it won't be an issue. I think solar will be so ubiquitous that when you move from one house to another, it'll already have solar on it because in 10 years from now, 1 decade, every new house that's built will have it. So it'll just be ubiquitous everywhere. And I think that's where it's coming. But the technology is advancing so rapidly is that vertical solar, in windows, built into the window itself, so that when we're putting windows in, you can see through it, but at the same time, the solar radiation coming in actually generates electricity. So I think the day is coming that technology, there's even been some science fiction stuff where you actually can roller it on, you paint it on, and the wires are actually painted into the paint, and then it generates electricity on the side of your house. So, I mean, that kind of stuff I think is coming. Again, low amount of energy, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't have to be very efficient if you're covering the whole house in it, right? Or the whole roof or whatever. So I think that's where the technology goes. Here's where I think the challenges are. The challenges are going to be is driving down the cost and making it, this is still $1,000, right? So I go buy a new phone and it's $1,000, right? So when it gets to the point where it's that ubiquitous, we have to drive the price down to where there's not this cost disparity where only certain people. Right now, it's only the people that look like us, they're 35 to 60 years old, they own their home and they've got equity in their home. That's really kind of the avatar. It's got to be to the point where every human being on Earth, whether you live in Africa or you live in Russia or you live in the Americas, you need to be able to have solar, to be able to power your life and your lifestyle. So I think that's where we're going to have the challenges, is getting it so cost effective that you can carry it around with you everywhere.
And I
Yeah,
think
yep.
Judy and George Jetson, they were in their 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had it going on, man. You look at all the
Yeah.
stuff on those cartoons. I used to watch it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, hey, think about it. You know, speaking of George and Judy Jetson, remember when they used to have video conferencing? And look
Sure.
at where we are now. They used to answer the phone with a video, and now we have FaceTime and we have Zoom and we have all
We
the
do.
We have telemedicine.
Ooh, yes.
Scott Sullivan, thanks for joining us today. It's good to see you again, my friend. It's been too long.
It has. and I
So you're
appreciate
hanging
it.
out in the Nashville area. So
You're coming over because I hear you. I heard you say you like country music, so I think you should come over.
I do. I used to work in country radio many moons ago.
95 XIL, the powerhouse country of Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Well, yeah, you got it. That's what we used to say. 95 XIL, you got it. That was we were AC back then, but I digress. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Scott Sullivan, thanks for joining us again. If you have questions or follow-up thoughts for Scott, I think we've got everything in the chat where you can find him. He's on LinkedIn.
Dropped his website in chat.
He is ubiquitous. How's that? He is Mr. Ubiquitous.
But remember, 2023, manage your expectations.
Manage the expectations. Thanks again for joining us. Quick comment or so, Teddy. I don't have much other than to say that, you know, I always say life's a journey, and different chapters you learn as you go. And I think back to the old days when we had a Rolodex and, you know, an answering machine, and my dad worked for a natural gas pipeline. So we had all kinds of, you know, natural gas. That's how we heated, I mean, whatever. But things have changed. They change. And to some degree, you know, you have to kind of change with it, or have to at least be open to learning how it might benefit you. Same thing for a phone. I remember, Teddy, real quick, I remember years ago, I used to attend a church in Ohio, and the board, elders, deacons, and trustees would meet. And I was the chairman of this board and trying to organize these meetings. And we had an over hour-long conversation as to whether to have an answering machine put on our church phone. Over an hour, we debated whether we should have that. Can you just think about that in today's context? And I think back to, you know, just don't be afraid of things to some degree. So again, Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Teddy, take us home.
Randy, I'm still on the fence of the solar stuff, but my wife finally convinced me to have you know, indoor plumbing in the house. I may very well go solar here soon.
You're out in the county, so you know, I'm glad you made the move.
Hey, you should get anybody that wants, just in the last thought that I'll give you is so that you can take away. Anybody that wants to charge you for a proposal, a solar proposal, and they won't come and give you a solar proposal unless they come to your house, just say no. Just any company out there that's reputable should be able to put together a solar proposal within 10 or 15 minutes and email it to you. And all they need is a copy of your electric bill and your physical address. We are so technologically advanced now. Get free proposals. If you get a proposal and you want to know if you got a good deal, send it to me and I'll give you a free evaluation.
Cool stuff. Good stuff, Scott. Thank you. You talking about the electric or the plumbing?
The electric.
Just checking.
The plumbing, I don't know. I don't know I'm from Kentucky. We haven't had plumbing for a long time. So
you're talking to Teddy. He knows what you're talking about.
All right.
Thanks again, Scott. Yeah, what you got, Teddy?
Next week we got Billy Bambro coming on. Billy Bambro is writes an article for Fortune magazine, or excuse me, Forbes magazine. Really good, intelligent guy, all about cryptocurrency. Oh yeah, I'm telling you. And Randy's finally sent me $10,000 to put in that for him. And but this is and we're serious. This is a big conversation going on. It is a currency that we cannot ignore. We may not be ready to use it yet, but we're going to be using it as time goes on. So next week, 11:55 a.m. on Wednesday, join us with Billy Bambro and the conversations about cryptocurrency. And we're Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy is sponsored in part by Blackwell Captive Solutions. We appreciate them being a sponsor. They're all about helping you with peace of mind and price stability. And and managing your claims, healthcare claims with self-insurance and keeping that gap, keeping that, I'm screwing up royally here. If you're using or your employer's using self-insurance, you need to understand who Blackwell Captive Solutions is. BlackwellCaptive.com. Billy, next week, Billy Bambro. This week, thanks a lot again, Scott, for being on the show. Randy, good seeing you. Thank you to our audience for showing up. We'll see you guys all next week.
See you, Scott. Take care.